I'm Erica, 29 female. I live alone in a small but tidy apartment in a city that never seems to sleep, and I work as a data analyst. My life is a world of spreadsheets, patterns, and logical conclusions, a quiet order I've built for myself. But this order was about to be shattered by the one variable I could never properly quantify: my own family and the staggering emotional debt I never realized I was paying. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The entire year had been a series of small, calculated sacrifices. It started in January, right after the sting of the previous Christmas's credit card bill had faded. I sat at my kitchen table, a fresh spreadsheet glowing on my laptop screen. The title was simple: Operation Christmas 2025. For anyone else, this might seem obsessive, but for me, it was breathing room. As a data analyst, my entire career was built on forecasting, on turning chaotic information into predictable outcomes. I applied the same logic to my life, especially to my finances. This spreadsheet wasn't just about money, it was about love quantified. My family wasn't wealthy. My mom, Linda, worked part-time as an administrative assistant, constantly worried about her retirement. My older sister, Jessica, a real estate agent, projected an image of immense success, but I knew her income was a roller coaster of commissions, feast or famine. Then there was Ryan, my younger brother, the baby of the family at 22. He was in his final year of a business degree, the great hope who was supposed to elevate our family's name. And I, quiet, stable Erica, was the financial bedrock, the reliable one, the one who paid for Ryan's tuition. It was a promise I'd made to my dad before he passed away. "Look after your brother, Erica," he'd whispered, his hand frail in mine. "Give him the chances I never had." I took that promise and coded it into my life's operating system. So every semester, a payment of $5,200 would leave my account and go directly to the university. I never thought twice about it. It was a fixed expense, a line item in the larger budget of my life. But this year, I wanted to do more. My family's love language, particularly my mother's and sister, was transactional. They measured affection in brand names and price tags. I'd always fallen short in their eyes. My gifts were always practical or thoughtful, which in their vocabulary were synonyms for cheap. This year, I was determined to speak their language. I wanted for once to see genuine smiles on Christmas morning, not the tight, polite masks they usually wore. So, the spreadsheet became my guide. I calculated that to afford the kind of gifts they'd truly appreciate, I needed to save an extra $300 a month. That meant no more morning lattes from the cafe downstairs. I learned to make my own, even bought a special thermal mug. Lunch out with coworkers became a packed salad I'd prepared the night before. I canceled 3 streaming services, telling myself I could catch up on shows later. My vacation time was spent on a staycation, exploring local parks instead of flying to a beach. When my friends planned a weekend trip, I had to invent a plausible excuse, the shame of admitting I was saving for Christmas presents feeling too pathetic to voice. Every dollar saved was a tiny victory. I tracked it all, color-coding my progress. Green for on track, red for when an unexpected expense, like a car repair, set me back. I watched my Christmas fund account grow, and with it, a sense of nervous excitement. This was going to be the year. The shopping process itself was another project. I started in October to avoid the December rush and to catch the early sales. For my mom, Linda, who was always complaining about feeling disconnected from her grandchildren on my cousin's side, I found a top-of-the-line digital photo frame. It wasn't just the frame. I spent weeks collecting, scanning, and curating photos. Pictures of her as a young woman, photos of her with my dad, snapshots of all of us as kids. I preloaded it and set it up with a cloud account so family members could add new pictures from anywhere. It was a bridge, a way to keep her connected. It cost nearly $400, a significant chunk of my budget, but I imagined her delight and knew it would be worth it. For Jessica, the real estate agent who lived and died by appearances, I found a designer handbag. It wasn't the biggest name brand she usually favored, which would have been thousands of dollars, but it was from a respected, chic Italian leather company, understated, elegant, and incredibly well-made. It was the kind of bag that signaled quiet confidence, not loud desperation. I'd seen her eyeing a similar one online. It was a splurge at over $500. But it was a statement. It said, "I see you, I know what you value." I even paid extra for the luxury gift wrapping. And for Ryan, my student brother, I bought the latest version of a premium business analytics software suite. His professors had mentioned it was the industry standard, and the student license was about to expire. A full professional license was expensive, over $600, but I saw it as an investment in his future, a tool that would give him a competitive edge when he graduated. It was a practical gift, yes, but it was the most expensive and, I thought, the most impactful. It was a continuation of my promise to my dad. I bought smaller, thoughtful gifts for my Aunt Susan and a few cousins, but the bulk of my effort and budget was focused on my mother, sister, and brother. By the time Christmas Eve arrived, I had a beautiful, gleaming pile of presents under my small artificial tree. I'd kept every single receipt, a habit born from years of budgeting. I tucked them into a folder, a satisfying record of a year's worth of discipline. The total cost, not including the tuition, was just shy of $2,000. It was more than I had ever spent, and a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. What if it still wasn't enough? I shook the thought away. This year would be different. I loaded the presents into my car, the crisp winter air biting at my cheeks. The drive to my mother's suburban home was filled with a fragile, hopeful anticipation. I imagined the scene, the warmth of the fireplace, the smell of roasted turkey, and for the first time, looks of genuine, unadulterated joy on the faces of the people I loved most. I had run the numbers, controlled the variables, and executed the plan. In my data-driven world, this should have guaranteed a positive outcome. But family dynamics are not a spreadsheet. They are a chaotic, unpredictable data set, and I was about to discover a devastating margin of error. As I pulled into the driveway, I took a deep breath, clutching the steering wheel. I was no longer just Erica, the data analyst. I was Erica, the hopeful daughter and sister, walking into the lion's den armed with beautifully wrapped packages, praying they would be enough. The warmth inside my mother's house was a stark contrast to the frigid air outside, but it felt superficial. The scent of pine from the oversized Christmas tree warred with the cloying aroma of a cinnamon-scented candle. My sister, Jessica, was already there, perched on the arm of the sofa like a queen holding court. She was on her phone, scrolling through social media with a practiced air of boredom. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes scanning my arms laden with gifts before flicking to my face. "You're late," she said, not as a greeting, but as an accusation. Her perfectly glossed lips barely moved. "Traffic was bad," I replied, my standard excuse. It was easier than saying I'd spent 20 minutes in my car, psyching myself up to walk through the door. My mother, Linda, bustled out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Erica, finally, put the gifts under the tree. Ryan will be down in a minute." She gave me a quick, dry hug that smelled of sage and anxiety. There was no "how are you?" or "so good to see you." It was straight to the logistics, as always. I dutifully arranged my offerings under the tree, my carefully wrapped presents looking almost humble next to the mountain of glossy, brand-name shopping bags Jessica had ostentatiously piled up. I could see the logos from across the room, high-end department stores and designer boutiques. A familiar wave of inadequacy washed over me, but I pushed it down. My gifts were thoughtful. That had to count for something. Ryan eventually sauntered downstairs, phone in hand, and gave me a distracted nod. The four of us settled into our familiar Christmas Eve rhythm: stilted conversation, forced cheerfulness, and the constant, low-level hum of Jessica's judgment. She spent most of dinner talking about a massive commission she had just closed on a luxury condo. "The bonus alone is more than some people make in a year," she announced, glancing at me for a fraction of a second too long. I just smiled and took a sip of water, refusing to take the bait. Christmas morning was no different. We gathered in the living room, mugs of coffee in hand. The gift exchange began with Jessica's presence. She had bought my mother an expensive anti-aging skincare set and Ryan a pair of designer sneakers that he immediately loved. For me, she handed over a small, flat box. Inside was a generic gift set from a pharmacy, a scented lotion and body wash combo. The kind of thing you buy for a coworker you barely know. "Saw it and thought of you," she said with a breezy smile. I knew it was a last-minute purchase devoid of any thought. Still, I smiled and said, "Thank you, Jess, it's lovely." Then it was my mother's turn. She gave us all checks. Jessica's was for $500. Red dollars, Ryan S. was for $300. Mine was for $100. "You're so good with money, Erica," she explained, as if punishing me for my own financial responsibility. "I know you'll make it stretch." This had happened every year, and every year it felt like a tiny paper cut to the soul. Finally, it was my turn to hand out my gifts. I started with my mom. I gave her the large, heavy box. "It's a digital photo frame, Mom," I explained as she unwrapped it. "I preloaded it with hundreds of old pictures, and everyone in the family can add new ones from their phones." She plugged it in. Photos of her youth, of her wedding, of our childhoods began to scroll across the screen. For a moment, I saw a flicker of genuine emotion in her eyes. "Oh," she said softly, "that's nice, dear." But then Jessica leaned over. "You know, my friend got one of those for free with her new phone plan." The magic was broken. My mother's smile tightened and she unplugged the frame. "I'll have to find a place for it," she said, setting it aside. $400 and weeks of effort dismissed in under a minute. My heart sank, but I moved on to Ryan. I handed him the software package. "It's the full professional license for that analytics program you were talking about," I told him, trying to keep my voice bright. "It should really help with your final projects and job hunting." He looked at the box, a confused frown on his face. "Oh, cool, thanks." He set it on the floor next to him without a second glance, already reaching for his phone again. $600, an investment in his future, treated like an unwanted textbook. I saved Jessica's for last, the Italian handbag. My hands were trembling slightly as I passed her the beautifully wrapped box. I had pinned so much hope on this one gift. She unwrapped it with an expert's efficiency, her painted nails tearing at the paper. She lifted the leather bag out of the box. She examined the stitching, ran her hand over the supple leather, and checked the label inside. "It's nice," she said, her voice carefully neutral. She held it up, scrutinizing it in the light. "The leather is decent quality." She placed it on the floor next to her, a clear foot away from the designer bags she had received from her clients and wealthy boyfriend. It was a clear, unspoken classification, B-list. The finality of their collective indifference was a physical blow. A year of saving, of planning, of hoping, all of it amounted to nothing. I felt foolish, like a child who had tried to buy her family's love and had been told her currency was worthless. I sat back, a hollow feeling spreading through my chest. The rest of the gift opening passed in a blur of fake enthusiasm and branded paper. As my mom was gushing over a gaudy necklace Jessica had given her, my sister picked up the scented candle I had brought as a small hostess gift. She sniffed it theatrically. Then, looking not at me but at our mother, she said, her voice loud enough for the entire room to hear, "Cheap, as expected." And then it happened, the single event that changed everything. My mother, Linda, laughed. It wasn't a small titter or a polite chuckle. It was a full, genuine laugh, rich with amusement. She looked at Jessica, and they shared a conspiratorial smile, a silent, perfect agreement. In that moment, they were a team, and I was the punchline to a joke I didn't understand. The sound of that laughter echoed in the sudden silence of the room. It was more painful than the insult itself. The insult was just words, but the laughter was validation. It was my own mother confirming that my efforts were a joke, that I was, and always would be, a disappointment. Something inside me didn't break. It clarified. The fuzzy, emotional data I had been trying to interpret for years suddenly resolved into a sharp, undeniable pattern. I was not a daughter or a sister. I was a utility, a resource to be tapped but never valued. A strange calm washed over me. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I simply smiled. It was a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. I stood up. "Where are you going?" my mother asked, her laughter finally dying out. "Home," I said, my voice even. "I've got a bit of a headache." Before I left, I did something that, in hindsight, was the first step in my rebellion. I walked over to the small table where I had left my purse. Next to it was the folder containing all the receipts from my Christmas shopping. I picked it up, the crisp papers a tangible record of my wasted effort. I held the folder in my hand and walked to the front door without another word. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The image of my sister's smirk and the sound of my mother's laughter were burned into my memory forever. The drive home was a study in absolute silence. I didn't turn on the radio. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the quiet swish of the tires on the cold pavement. The festive lights on the houses I passed seemed to mock me, their cheerful glow a world away from the icy void that had opened up in my chest. I wasn't sad. The emotion was something colder, sharper. It was the dispassionate clarity of a hypothesis being proven correct. My hypothesis, that my value to my family was purely functional. The experiment, a year of sacrifice and nearly $2,000 in gifts. The result, laughter. When I got back to my apartment, the first thing I did was walk over to my little Christmas tree. The few gifts I'd received, Jessica's pharmacy gift set, my mother's $100 check, were sitting there. I picked them up, walked them to the trash can in the kitchen, and dropped them in. I didn't feel anger or spite. It just felt like tidying up, like removing erroneous data points that were cluttering the picture. Then I went to my desk and opened the folder of receipts. I took them out and laid them across my desk, just as I would with source documents for a new project at work. The glossy slip for the Italian handbag, the email confirmation for Ryan's software license, the long, itemized receipt for the digital photo frame. I smoothed each one out, the crinkling of the paper the only sound in the room. My mind, trained to find patterns, began to work. I wasn't just looking at prices. I was looking at a story of misplaced effort. Hours of online research for the perfect gift. Lunch breaks spent comparison shopping. Weekends dedicated to a project whose stakeholders would never appreciate the work. I had treated my family like a problem to be solved with enough effort and resources, but I'd failed to account for the most crucial variable. They were not interested in a solution. They were perfectly happy with the problem, as long as I was the one bearing the cost. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet. I started entering the data. Item, recipient, cost. The total stared back at me from the screen, $1,874.32. A wave of nausea rolled over me, not for the money itself, but for what it represented. Nearly $2,000 of carefully saved cash poured into a black hole of ingratitude. And that's when my phone, which I'd left on the counter, buzzed. I ignored it. A minute later, it buzzed again. I assumed it was my mom with a half-hearted, guilt-driven text asking if I was okay. I was in no mood to offer her absolution, but the phone buzzed a third time. Annoyed, I walked over to see who was so insistent. It was a text from Ryan, my brother, the one whose future I was literally investing in. My finger hovered over the notification, a tiny part of me hoping for a word of support, an apology on behalf of the family. Maybe he'd seen how hurt I was. Maybe he would be the one to bridge the gap. I opened the message. It contained 4 words. "Don't be so sensitive." That was it. No, "Hey, are you okay?" No, Mom and Jessica were out of line. Just a command, a dismissal, an instruction to recalibrate my emotions to better suit their comfort. He wasn't just ignoring my pain, he was invalidating it. He was telling me that my reaction was the problem, not their cruelty. And he was doing it on a phone I probably helped pay for, using a data plan that was part of a family package I organized and managed while awaiting a future that I was personally funding. The cold clarity I'd felt in the car now hardened into something diamond-sharp. It was a moment of absolute, irrefutable truth. The text message wasn't an olive branch, it was a bill. It was the invoice for my continued participation in this toxic family system. The price was my silence, my compliance, and my dignity. And I decided, in that instant, that the price was too high. I sat down at my laptop, my movements calm and deliberate. The receipt for Ryan's software was still on the desk. An investment, I'd called it, but any good analyst knows you don't keep pouring resources into a failing asset. You cut your losses. You reallocate funds to more promising ventures. My promise to my dad echoed in my mind, look after your brother. But looking after him didn't mean enabling him. It didn't mean setting myself on fire to keep him warm. My dad would not have wanted me to be a doormat. He would have wanted me to be respected. I opened my online banking portal. The interface was familiar, comforting in its predictability. I navigated to the scheduled payments section. There it was, a recurring transaction scheduled for the first of every month. University of Northwood tuition. Recipient, Ryan Evans. Amount, $5,200. The next payment was scheduled to go out in a week for the upcoming spring semester. My heart wasn't pounding. My hands weren't shaking. I felt a profound and unsettling calm. I was simply correcting a data entry error. The value in the family support column had been grossly overestimated for years. It was time for an adjustment. I clicked on the payment. The options appeared on the screen: edit, skip, delete. I moved my coup. R-SOAR over delete. For a fleeting second, I hesitated. A lifetime of conditioning, be the good daughter, be the responsible one, be the peacemaker, washed over me. My mother's disappointed face, my father's dying wish. Then I reread Ryan's text. Don't be so sensitive. My finger clicked the mouse. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to delete this recurring payment? This action cannot be undone. I stared at the words. Cannot be undone. It was exactly what I needed. A clean break, a final transaction. I clicked confirm. A small green checkmark appeared on the screen. The payment was gone. The entire series of future payments gone. A financial cord, an umbilical cord of one-sided support, had been severed. I had just taken back control of over $20,000 a year. The thought was staggering. I closed the laptop. The silence in my apartment was different now. It wasn't empty, it was expansive. It was the silence of a ledger that had finally been balanced. I had spent the day being told my worth was negligible, but with a few simple clicks, I had just reminded myself of my own value. I didn't know what would happen next, what storm was about to break. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt a sense of peace. I had stopped trying to calculate the price of my family's affection, and had finally understood the incalculable value of my own self-respect. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a state of surreal tranquility. I unplugged my Christmas tree, put the folder of receipts away in my filing cabinet under closed accounts, and made myself a simple dinner. I watched a movie, drank a glass of wine, and went to bed early. I had turned my phone completely off, not just on silent. I knew the fallout would come, but for a few precious hours, I wanted to exist in a space free from their influence. It was the first truly silent night I'd had in years. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in a decade. The anxiety that usually lived in a tight knot in my stomach was gone. I made coffee, sat by my window, and watched the city wake up. It was only after my second cup that I felt ready to face the music. I took a deep breath, walked over to the counter, and powered my phone back on. It was like igniting a firework. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications, a rapid-fire succession of texts and missed calls that made the phone vibrate uncontrollably in my hand for nearly a full minute. I set it down on the counter and watched it buzz itself into exhaustion. There were 27 missed calls, 10 from my mother, 12 from Jessica, and 5 from Ryan. The notifications on my screen were a chaotic tapestry of rage and panic. I opened the family group chat, morbidly curious to see the timeline of their discovery. The first message had come in at 11:03 p.m. the previous night, from Ryan. It was a screenshot of an email from the university's finance department. The subject line was stark: payment failure notification. Below it, The email informed him that the scheduled tuition payment of $5,200 had been canceled by the sender. The messages that followed were a masterclass in narcissistic injury. RYAN, what is this? Erica, my tuition payment failed. Did your card get declined or something? Fix it. JESSICA, she's probably doing this for attention because her feelings got hurt yesterday. How childish can you possibly be, Erica? You're going to ruin Ryan's future over a joke. Mom, Erica, honey, please call me. This must be a mistake. Ryan needs this for his classes. You know we can't afford to pay it. Please answer your phone. JESSICA, she's ignoring us. Of course she is. She's probably sitting in her apartment feeling all high and mighty. This is unbelievable, after everything we do for her. That last message almost made me laugh out loud. Everything we do for her. What exactly was that? Allow me the privilege of funding their lives while they insulted me. The messages grew more frantic as the night wore on. There were threats from Jessica about how I was tearing the family apart. There was emotional blackmail from my mother, invoking my father's memory and how devastated he would be. There were demands from Ryan, who seemed to believe the tuition money was a birthright he was being unjustly denied. I read through all of it with a strange sense of detachment. It was like analyzing a data set from a particularly dysfunctional company. The patterns were so clear, the immediate assumption that I was in the wrong, the complete lack of self-awareness, the seamless shift from condescension to panic the moment their supply line was cut. They weren't angry because they were worried about me. They were angry because the ATM was out of service. I put the phone down, the torrent of angry words leaving me surprisingly unaffected. They were predictable. Their reactions were exactly what my new, colder logic would have forecasted, but as I was out to walk away, the phone screen lit up one more time. This was different. It wasn't a group chat message. It wasn't a notification of another missed call. It was a private text message from a number I hadn't seen in a while but recognized instantly. It was from my Aunt Susan. My Aunt Susan was my mother's older sister, a retired nurse who lived a few towns over. She was quiet, observant, and had always been on the periphery of our family dramas. She attended the major holidays, always brought a sensible dish, and rarely said more than a few words. I'd always felt a sense of calm around her, but we weren't particularly close. She was just there, a quiet, steady presence in the background. Her text message was short, but it landed with the force of a tectonic shift. It read, Erica, I saw what happened at your mother's house yesterday. I've been seeing it for years. I can only imagine your phone is blowing up right now. When you're ready to talk, call me. I made a pot of coffee, and I'm on your side. I read the message once, then twice, then a third time. The last 4 words seemed to lift off the screen. I'm on your side. It was a validation so pure, so unexpected, that it cracked through the icy composure I had built around myself. My eyes welled up with tears, not tears of sadness or anger, but of overwhelming relief. It was the relief of a person who has been speaking a language no one else understands, only to finally hear a reply in their native tongue. Someone else had seen it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't imagining the years of subtle digs, the financial exploitation, the emotional neglect. Aunt Susan, the silent observer, had been taking notes all along. The chaos of the group chat, the angry demands, the feigned concern, it all faded into white noise. That one, quiet message was the only thing that mattered. It was a lifeline thrown into the storm of my family's making. The message that made me freeze wasn't one of anger or panic from my family. It was one of quiet, unwavering support from the one person I had never expected it from. For years, I had been operating under the assumption that I was alone in my assessment of our family dynamic. I believed that if I just kept quiet, kept providing, kept being the stable one, that one day they would see my value. But Aunt Susan's text revealed a new, critical piece of information. The problem wasn't that they couldn't see my value. The problem was that they saw it all too well and had built a system to exploit it. and I wasn't the only one who had noticed. The storm was raging in my phone, but for the first time, I knew I wasn't going to have to weather it alone. I let the group chat fester for a few more hours, a digital monument to my family's meltdown. Then, with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years, I called Aunt Susan. She picked up on the first ring. "I had a feeling you'd call today," she said, her voice calm and even, a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. "Your text," I started, my voice catching. Thank you." "There's nothing to thank me for, dear," she replied gently. "Truth is truth. I've been biting my tongue for 15 years. I figured it was time I stopped." We talked for nearly 2 hours. It was less of a conversation and more of an excavation, with Aunt Susan acting as the lead archaeologist of our family's dysfunction. She unearthed memories I had long since buried, reframing them with the clarity of an outside observer. She reminded me of the time in high school when Jessica borrowed my hard-earned savings for a school trip, a loan my mother insisted I forgive. She brought up the down payment I had given Jessica for her first condo 5 years ago, a gift of $10,000 that I had to take out of my own retirement savings, which Jessica had promised to pay back and never did. She talked about how my mother, Linda, had always praised Jessica's flashy, unstable career while dismissing my steady, reliable one as boring. "You, my dear, were never a person to them," Aunt Susan said, her voice hardening slightly. "You were an insurance policy. You were the safety net they could all bounce on, knowing you'd never let them fall. The moment you took the net away, they didn't worry that you might be hurt. They just got angry that the ground was suddenly so hard." She told me about conversations she'd overheard, whispers between my mother and sister after I'd left family gatherings. They'd talk about my sensible car, my simple apartment, my lack of a glamorous partner, all as evidence that I didn't really need the money, making it easier for them to justify their constant financial reliance on me. My prudence wasn't seen as a virtue. It was seen as a surplus they were entitled to. "Your father," Aunt Susan said with a sigh, "he was a good man, but he saw Ryan as his second chance. He put all his hopes on that boy, and when he died, Linda transferred that pressure onto you. She A debt his dream your debt. That was never fair, Erica." Every word she spoke was a brick in a new foundation being built inside of me. For my entire adult life, I had been the family's designated grown-up, the one who had to be sensible so everyone else could be reckless. Hearing someone else, a respected elder, validate my reality was life-altering. It gave me the permission I never knew I needed to stop setting my own needs aside. "So, what do you do now?" she asked, her tone shifting from analytical to practical. It was the nurse in her, moving from diagnosis to treatment plan. "I don't know," I admitted. "I canceled the tuition. That felt definitive, but I know they won't let it go. They'll call, they'll show up here, they'll try to guilt me into fixing it." "They will," she agreed. "Linda will cry, Jessica will attack, and Ryan will play the victim. It's a script they've performed 100 times. You need to decide if you're going to keep playing your part." That was the question, wasn't it? My entire role in the family had been the provider. If I wasn't that, who was I? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. As we talked, an idea began to form in my mind. It was an idea born of my professional life, the only area where I had ever felt truly competent and in control. When I present findings to a board of executives, I don't appeal to their emotions. I don't beg them to see my point of view. I present them with cold, hard data. I show them a spreadsheet. "I think," I said slowly, the plan crystallizing as I spoke, "I need to give them a final report." After I hung up with Aunt Susan, I felt a surge of energy. I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out years of financial records, bank statements, old credit card bills, email confirmations. I created a new spreadsheet, this one far more complex than the Christmas budget. I titled it Family Financial Ledger, 2015-2025. I created columns, date, description, recipient, amount. Then I started to build the story of the last 10 years, line by line. Ryan's tuition, $5,200 per semester, twice a year, for 3.5 years. Total, $36,400. Ryan's living expenses, an average of $300 a month I sent him for groceries and books. Total, $12,600. Jessica's condo loan, $10,000, never repaid. The time Jessica's commission fell through, and I covered her car payment for 3 months. Total, $1,350. The countless times my mother called, short on cash before her payday. The "Can I borrow $200? That was never a loan, I estimated conservatively. Total, at least $5,000 over the years. I even added the cost of this year's cheap Christmas gifts at the bottom. I worked for hours, fueled by a potent cocktail of anger and empowerment. The numbers grew, the sum at the bottom of the column climbing to a truly staggering figure. It was a decade of my life, quantified in dollars and cents. A decade of skipped vacations, delayed home renovations, and a retirement account that was smaller than it should be. When I was done, I created a second tab in the spreadsheet. This one was titled Contributions Received. I listed the pharmacy gift set from Jessica, estimated value, $15, and the $100 checks my mother had given me at Christmas for the last 10 years total, $1,000. The final step was to create a summary chart. It was a simple bar graph. One bar, towering and massive, was labeled Erica's financial contributions. Next to it, a tiny, almost invisible sliver was labeled Financial Contributions Received. The visual disparity was sickening. This spreadsheet was more than just a financial record. It was my resignation letter. I was officially resigning from the role of family ATM. I saved the document to my desktop. My plan was no longer just about surviving the storm. It was about demonstrating with irrefutable proof why the storm had started in the first place. I wasn't going to argue with them. I wasn't going to cry or yell. I was going to schedule a meeting, share my screen, and present the data. I was going to draw a new bottom line, and this time, it would be on my terms. The next 24 hours were a test of my newfound resolve. My family, realizing their group chat barrage was ineffective, escalated their tactics. They began calling my work phone. Jessica even left a scathing, 1-star review on my apartment building's public website, bizarrely claiming the walls were too thin and that she could hear my constant, passive-aggressive sighing. It was so absurd it was almost impressive. I ignored it all. I was a woman on a mission, preparing for the most important presentation of my life. That evening, after carefully reviewing my spreadsheet one last time, I sent a single, concise message to the family group chat. I will be available for a video call at 7 p.m. tomorrow evening to discuss the financial situation. This will be the only time I am willing to discuss it. If you wish to participate, accept the calendar. Our invitation I am about to send. If not, I will consider the matter closed. I immediately sent a meeting link. Within minutes, 3 acceptances popped up. The bait was taken. The following evening, I sat at my desk, my laptop open, my spreadsheet ready. I was dressed in a simple, professional blouse. I had a glass of water next to me. My heart was beating steadily. I was not a hurt daughter or an angry sister. I was a data analyst about to deliver a report on a decade-long project that was now being terminated. At 7 p.m. sharp, I started the video call. One by one, their faces appeared in boxes on my screen. My mother, Linda, looking pale and worried. Jessica, her face a mask of simmering rage, her arms crossed tightly. And Ryan, looking sullen and aggrieved, like a king whose tribute had been unjustly withheld. "Thank you for joining," I began, my voice clear and even, betraying none of the emotion churning beneath the surface. "I've called this meeting to provide clarity on my recent decision regarding Ryan's tuition and to outline the terms of our financial relationship moving forward." "Erica, this is ridiculous," Jessica immediately snapped. "This isn't a business meeting. You can't just cut Ryan off. What is wrong with you?" "I will take questions at the end of the presentation," I said calmly. To ensure we are all on the same page, I have prepared some data. I clicked the Share Screen button. My spreadsheet with its stark title and damning numbers filled their screens. I saw my mother flinch. Jessica's eyes widened in disbelief. Ryan just looked confused. For the past 10 years, I began, moving my cursor to highlight the relevant cells, I have been providing a significant amount of financial support to this family. Let's start with Ryan's education, which has been the most recent point of contention. I walked them through it, number by number, my voice the dispassionate tone of a newsreader. I detailed the $36,400 in tuition and the $12,600 in living expenses. That brings the total investment in Ryan's education, to date, to $49,000, I stated. I saw Ryan's jaw drop. I don't think he had ever conceived of it as a single, massive number. Now, let's move on to Jessica, I continued, navigating to the next section. In 2020, I provided a $10,000 loan for a down payment on your first condo. That loan has an outstanding balance of $10,000. Additionally, in 2022, I covered 3 months of your car payments, totaling $1,350. Jessica's face was turning a blotchy red. That was a gift. You said you wanted to help. It was positioned as a loan, and the term help does not negate the monetary value, I replied evenly, not straying from my script. And Mom, over the years, I have provided numerous small, undocumented loans, which I have conservatively estimated at $5,000. I let the numbers hang in the air for a moment before moving to the final, brutal summary page, the bar chart. In total, over the past decade, my direct financial contributions to the three of you have exceeded $65,000, I said, my cursor hovering over the giant bar on the graph. During that same period, the financial contributions I have received, primarily in the form of Christmas and birthday checks, total approximately $1,150. The silence on the call was absolute. They were staring at the screen, at the visual representation of their own entitlement. I had taken their vague, unspoken expectations and rendered them in stark, undeniable black and white. The events of this past Christmas, I continued, my voice softening slightly but losing none of its firmness, were simply the final data point in a long-trending pattern. My contributions have been met not with gratitude, but with expectation and, ultimately, with disrespect. The return on investment has been negative. Therefore, as a sound financial manager, I am restructuring my portfolio. I stopped sharing my screen, so all they could see was my calm, determined face. Effective immediately, all financial support is terminated. Ryan, you will need to secure a student loan or find a job to cover your final semester. The Bank of Erica is closed. Jessica, I will be mailing you a formal letter requesting a payment plan for your outstanding $10,000 loan. Mom, our relationship will need to exist without a financial component from now on. My mother finally broke, her face crumpling. Erica, how can you be so cruel, so cold? We're your family. Family is supposed to be a source of mutual support and respect, I replied, the words I had practiced with Aunt Susan coming out smoothly. This relationship has not been mutual. I am not being cruel, I am being solvent. I am simply closing the ledger. Ryan finally spoke, his voice cracking with a mixture of panic and fury. You've ruined my life, I'm Goy. NG to have to drop out. No, Ryan, I said. You're going to have to take responsibility for your own life. It's the most valuable lesson your business degree will ever teach you. Jessica just stared at me, her eyes burning with a hatred that was terrifying in its intensity. I will never, ever forgive you for this, she hissed. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, I said. I'm announcing a change in policy. And with that, I took a deep breath. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time. I moved my cursor to the red end call button, and without waiting for another word, I clicked it. The screen went blank. The boxes with their angry, devastated faces disappeared. It was over. The ledger was closed. The silence that followed the call was profound. It felt like the stillness after a massive storm has finally passed, leaving behind a strange new landscape. For a few days, I existed in a state of nervous anticipation, expecting a counterattack. A knock on my door, a scene at my office, but none came. It seemed my data-driven presentation had been so shockingly direct, so outside their usual script of emotional manipulation, that it had left them stunned into inaction. Aunt Susan called me the day after the video call. "Your mother called me," she said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. She was hysterical, said you treated them like criminals. "And what did you say?" I asked. "I told her that if you have to write down all the money someone owes you, it's usually because they've been acting like one," she replied dryly. "Don't you worry, Erica. You did the right thing. It'll be hard, but you did the right thing." Her words were a comfort, but the true confirmation of my choice came not from words, but from the changes in my own life. The first major change was my bank account. When the first of the month rolled around, that familiar, massive deduction for Ryan's tuition didn't happen. Seeing my balance remain high felt like a physical weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time, my earnings felt entirely my own. The weeks turned into months. The angry texts from my family slowed to a trickle and then stopped altogether. I learned through the family grapevine, via Aunt Susan, that Ryan had indeed been forced to take out a student loan and had found a part-time job waiting tables. Jessica, furious at my demand for repayment, had sent me a single, venomous email before blocking me on all platforms. My mother attempted to guilt-trip me a few more times with voicemails about her, loneliness, and disappointment. But when I didn't respond, they eventually ceased. The space they had occupied in my head, the constant, low-level anxiety of trying to manage their expectations and finances, slowly began to clear. It was like closing dozens of unnecessary programs that had been slowing down my computer's operating system. With my newfound mental and financial freedom, I began to invest in myself. I took the $5,200 from that first non-payment and booked a 2-week trip to Italy, a dream I had deferred for a decade, because it always seemed too extravagant. I walked through ancient ruins, ate pasta in sun-drenched courtyards, and stood on a cliff overlooking the Amalfi Coast, feeling the sea breeze on my face. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just on vacation. I was on a pilgrimage to find the person I was when I wasn't busy being everyone else's support system. When I returned, I continued to reallocate the funds that had once been earmarked for my family. I maxed out my contributions to my retirement account. I hired a financial planner to help me invest wisely. I started a renovation project on my small apartment, replacing the old, worn-out kitchen with something bright and modern. Every new cabinet, every gleaming appliance, felt like a monument to my independence. My life became quieter, but infinitely richer. My relationships with my friends deepened now that I had the emotional and financial bandwidth to be truly present. I joined a hiking club and discovered a love for the outdoors. My world, which had once revolved around the claustrophobic orbit of my family's needs, expanded in beautiful and unexpected ways. The following Christmas arrived not with a sense of dread, but with quiet anticipation. I decorated my apartment for myself. I bought a small, real tree that filled the air with the scent of pine. I spent Christmas Eve with Aunt Susan. We cooked a simple, delicious meal, exchanged modest but heartfelt gifts, and talked for hours. There were no glares, no passive-aggressive comments, no transactional measures of affection. There was only warmth and genuine connection. Later that evening, after Aunt Susan had gone home, I sat on my couch, sipping hot chocolate and looking at my little tree. I thought about my family and felt a surprising lack of anger. There was a quiet sadness for what we could have been, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of peace. I had lost a family, but I had gained myself. I had spent so many years trying to balance their emotional ledger, always ending up in the red. By finally closing the account, I had discovered a different kind of wealth, the kind that doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. It was the quiet, unassailable profit of self-respect. It was the simple, priceless dividend of peace.